This is where my research has been very focused on DNA. And what we're talking about is digitized DNA. We now have the ability, and you and I will talk about this next week in more detail, but the short version for today is that we have been able to convert DNA into digital ones and zeros. We have been able to sequence and digitize DNA, and we can create computer models, and that's what in silico means, is in silicon. We can, within the computer, rearrange our own DNA, and we can construct from the four building block nucleotides the DNA as we would like the DNA to be arranged. We can create anything in the computer, and we can then reassemble in real time physically using the actual four base chemicals. We can actually create organisms that have never existed in nature. And this is being done on college campuses and college competitions, where organisms are being created that have never existed. And this comes from the sequencing, the digitizing of DNA, and then the printing of DNA, if you will, 3D printing, or more specifically, a DNA assembler. So what I'm presenting is that there's the adiabatic quantum computer that we've spoken of before in previous shows that is actually able to control this reassembling of digitized DNA into really any life form that is desired. And that's the level of technology that we have reached. And therefore, I'll read to you very quickly. I think this was the short statement that is at the end of my article before I quote Revelation 9:1 through 12. But the paragraph is, spirits perhaps may further be defined and described as digitized biology, organisms replicated by software, imitating life in silico via an artificially intelligent 600 cell nanodiamond tetrahedral fourth dimension quantum computer connected to other worlds. Now, this is my article and my summation. Essentially, we're talking about with Saturn, digitized biology in the form of ones and zeros being freed from Saturn and transmitted back to Earth, and then being reassembled and recombined into physical living, because the mainstream media is beginning to present it in our face, this concept of immortality through DNA manipulation.
Yeah. One of my colleagues, Doug Hamp, has a book called Corrupting the Image and looks at DNA and believes that there's something to the mark of the beast there. And the concept of immortality within the occult as well is so fascinating to me because, and I've been kind of harping on this thought for a few days here, but, you know, as being created as imagers of God, as human beings, to my understanding, all humans actually bear the image of God. And so for us to be human is to image God. And part of what our purpose as created beings was to tend to the garden, but also to create the whole earth as that, you know, paradise that God could dwell with us on this planet. And part of that was immortality, that we had this immortal, eternal life in our original created state with God. But that we believed the lie that somehow if we ate the forbidden fruit that we would have, you know, be like gods. And, you know, because of that lie, we lost that access to God in an open sense until Jesus came. But this concept of immortality is interesting because I think it's inherent in our spirit, in our soul. Basically, the way we were designed is that we are eternal beings. And so the occult, what they're doing is trying to find it again when Jesus Christ offered it on the cross. You know, it's such a simple thing that people miss. And the quest for that immortality on our own terms, on our own timeline, with our own hands, is really the push of transhumanism. And so it's just fascinating when I start digging into all this stuff and uncover what the occult is doing. The things that they are trying to achieve is very close to what Christ has given us, what we have already received in, you know, through God, through the cross and everything else. So, you know, it's hard to, I don't know. It's just kind of challenging because we often just bash the occult or like just say, oh, they're just Satanists. But really, they're the people, they're human beings, they're imagers of God too. They're being deceived, right? It's a deep deception because they're playing on that same inherent desire or inherent, I guess, God-given right for us to be eternal, for us to live on a paradise planet kind of thing. And it just sounds weird, but at the same time, when you look at the book of Revelation, at the end of it, God restores the earth, restores the heavens and the earth. And it's really the whole arc of the Bible is you have a job to do. You have to create paradise on earth, basically Eden on earth. And then we fall, we fail, but then God loved us. So he sent Jesus. And then at the end of the story, we achieve it through Christ. So I don't know, there's a whole arc there. And I think I've developed maybe not sympathy might not be the right word, but a sort of, I guess maybe empathy towards the people who are in the occult. Sure. And just a heart for them, because it's like, man, you guys are seeking the very thing that Christ gave us, and you have been deceived, and you're twisting what Christ did into something negative. And, you're even to the point where you're going to probably start killing a bunch of Christians just because of their faith, and that's part of the scriptures as well, where the Antichrist goes after the saints and everything. So in any case, I'm kind of rambling now there, but
no, but you're demonstrating the concept of love your enemy. And I agree with you. Our hearts go out to our fellow human beings who have been deceived. We know where they're going if they don't turn to Christ. And that's the whole point of your discussion and my discussion and our missions, our ministries, is to say to people, look, you can look at all this physics and all of this other occult activity, and you can see it, and it's real, and it's unfolding, and it's being revealed by people like you and me, because we're instruments. We're being used. We're not special. We're just being used as witnesses by God. But the point is, we have a choice. The physicists and engineers with the LHC have the same choice that you and I have, and that is we can choose God and Christ, or we can choose Lucifer. And unfortunately, through that deception, they have chosen Lucifer, and there are no in-between areas. It's one or the other. That's where we're at with humanity. And humanity is splitting, and humanity can make their free will choice which direction they want to go in that split.
Right. And then ultimately, I think the mark of the beast is really the point at which there is no return, because there's no mercy for those who take the mark or worship the image. So
that's right.
It seems
and
to
that's
be
the change in DNA.
Right.
The DNA is the mark of the beast.